Hello and welcome to a brand new Arseblog Arsecast right here on arseblog.com. How are you? Hope you're well. Thank you for being here. As always, it's a bit of a strange week because there's no Arsenal this weekend. The 2-week break, the winter lull, if you want to call it that, is in full effect. Arsenal's players were given some time off, and right now they're at a training camp in Dubai. The hard work has begun. They were given a couple of days off. Training began on Thursday. They come back to the UK on Monday or Tuesday and then get ready for Newcastle next weekend. So it is a bit of a strange week for podcasting, and I'm interested to see what the impact of this training camp will be. There's clearly a measure of team building and togetherness and trying to galvanise the squad ahead of the last part of the season, but also it gives Mikel Arteta a chance to work on some things with the players on the training ground. This isn't about fitness now at this point. This is about formations and tactics and systems and in-game stuff, I'm sure. So he's going to be working with the players fairly intensively outside of this schedule, the hectic schedule that we've had since he took over, which is basically play a game, recover from the game, prepare for the next game, play a game, recover from the game, prepare for the next game, etc., etc., etc. So there's more scope for, I don't know if experimentation is the right thing, but maybe over the course of the 6 weeks that Mikel Arteta has been in charge, he has identified some things that he would like to put in place, some tactical tweaks here and there, and this is the perfect way to do it. We won't see the proof of that, of course, until we start playing games again, but that won't be too far away, even if it isn't this weekend. Busy show for you today, though. A little bit later on, Tim Stillman will be chatting exclusively to the Arsenal women midfielder Jordan Nobbs. They talk about her recovery from a cruciate ligament injury, of course, in recent times. It's something that has been quite prevalent at Arsenal over the last year or so. Hector Bellerin, Rob Holding, and now, of course, Callum Chambers has gone down with an injury. But she also talks about the upcoming North London derby against Spurs women, and you can hear that a little bit later on in the show. Also, I will give you the winners in a little while of our competition, which we ran last week with thanks to soccerclub.com, where sock is the word sock, and you've got, Arsenal socks to give away. I can say bruised banana socks now, I think, because that was the answer to the question. Not too many people got that one wrong, I have to say. The winners of the competition will be coming up in a little while. But now, as always, I'm delighted to welcome back to the Arsecast, Philippe Auclair. Hi, Philippe.
Good morning to you.
Good morning. We haven't spoken on the podcast, at least, since Mikel Arteta took over. So I'm just curious, after this hectic schedule that we played, 10 games from December 26th until this winter lull has kicked in, what are your impressions of what he's done, how he's done it, and what he might do from here? That opening month, 6 weeks of his time as Arsenal manager.
I think he's stabilized the patient.
Okay.
I think we were close to being taken to A&E, and you could carry on with this kind of tired metaphor for a long time, but he's stabilized the patient. He's addressed, I think, what were the most pressing problems with the team, i.e. the frailty of the defense, even if there have been moments when you still thought, my goodness, how can we survive this season with this kind of organization at the back? But slowly it's getting there. I would say, as per usual, it's far too early to say, but if it had been a disaster, we'd know by now. And it hasn't been a disaster. The atmosphere is markedly improved. I've been to every home game since he's arrived. And the difference is staggering. And it's not just in the stadium, it's the way the people on their way to the stadium, the way they talk about the team, the way they talk about the players, even the way people talk about the problems that we might have has changed. There is not this depressive state that there was around the club and within the fandom for some time. So it's very positive. I mean, I set my sights, I think, and my ambitions quite low. Because in fairness, I was really genuinely worried at one point that it might get much, much worse. And when I mean much, much worse, I mean to go back to one of those horrible seasons, before George Graham arrived, when honestly you thought, oh God, what's going to happen to this club.
Yeah, he hasn't had a great deal. I mean, the results, people will say, okay, results aren't that much better, but I think we have to take into account as well that, you're right. I think the organisation and the structure of the team is much better. We're more solid. We're more compact. There are still plenty of things for him to work on, but also I think, we have to take into account that he is a new manager. He is learning himself on the job, and he's been dealt a couple of difficult hands along the way. You think about Aubameyang getting a red card at Crystal Palace, David Luiz getting sent off against Chelsea and still managing to get something out of that game, losing Callum Chambers to a cruciate injury. There have been some fairly substantial things for him to have to deal with above and beyond the sickly patient that he came in to take over.
Yes, indeed. And the fact as well that the club doesn't have the resources to back him to the hilt in the transfer market, which I'm sure we'll have a word about in a second. But I mean, it's funny you should mention that David Luiz sending off. Well, not funny, but I was at that game. I was at Stamford Bridge, and it was an absolutely terrific performance in many ways. And I know Arsenal were battered, conceded an awful lot of chances and so forth, but the remarkable character that they showed on that night, and especially the reaction of the away fans and the relationship between the team and the away fans was really something quite moving, actually, because I hadn't experienced it for quite a while. And it showed, it's only what? I mean, we're talking quite 8 games, 9 games, perhaps, something like that, out of which far too many are draws, obviously. But it's been overall, to use a Wengerian expression, it's been positive, and it's been actually, I think, very positive.
Okay, so you talked about backing the manager to the hilt in the January transfer window and the resources not being available to do that. However, we did get 2 players in, 2 loan players. Cedric Soares from Southampton. Hopefully his knee is improving rapidly. And Pablo Mari from Flamengo, a central defender, a left-footed central defender, something that Arteta spoke about as a way for him to deal with the tactical elements that he wants to implement in the game and the way that we play and the way we pass the ball, etc., etc. How do you view those 2 deals in the context of this January window? Is it a case that was as good as Arsenal can do with the resources available in this particular month? Do you think that they will provide depth and security to the squad? Your gut feeling on the signings?
First of all, I want to say that I shouldn't say too much about Pablo Mari because I lost track of him. I was following him a little bit when he came to Manchester City, and I was wondering, who is that player? I mean, is he one for the future for them? And then I lost track of him a bit, and only saw, honestly, snippets of games in Brazil. So I won't play the expert on this one.
Okay.
And I will entirely rely on what friends who know far better about Brazilian football have told me, i.e. some people like Tim Vickery have been saying. Who do rate him. But what exactly is going to be his role in the next few months, I have absolutely no idea. So I'll be absolutely frank about that. I can't pass judgment on that. I think the left-footed element is very interesting. Also makes me think, does that mean that we might also go for a 3 at the back again in the near future? That's not impossible, and perhaps not something we should be against, considering the squad that Arteta's got at his disposal at the moment. It might not be such a bad idea, actually, provided some of them get fit again. Cedric Soares is an interesting one because he's actually a player that I do rate and whom I think has been underwhelming during his time at Southampton for reasons that I do not necessarily understand fully. He certainly hasn't been as convincing as I thought he would be. And certainly the people who'd followed the early part of his career would say. But of course, the interesting thing is that he's coming at a position where we thought we had 2 decent players who were competing for a place in the starting 11, i.e. Hector and Ainsley Maitland-Niles. And is it a way to bring Maitland-Niles into midfield in his favored position, and so we do have cover at right back? Or is it that Arteta thinks that he could even cover at left back if needed be? I'm not too sure about that, because I'm not too sure that Suarez has played an awful lot at left back. So I was a little bit puzzled. But also one thing it confirmed to me, perhaps more importantly, is that even in a situation where we're hovering around the 10th place in the table, and when we are not so far, still, despite everything, despite all these draws, we're not so far from, let's say, 6th or 7th place. It's not totally out of the question that we fighting and having a decent series of results, we could back there. But that would have meant making perhaps a bigger effort than the club has done. And then you think, well, maybe it's just something we've got to get accustomed to. And the fact that the club certainly is not pulling its weight financially as it used to. If you look at the Deloitte Money League, we were there in view of the top 5 for a while. Then we came down, then we went down to 9th place in 2017-18. Then we are now out of the top 10, behind Juve, behind Chelsea, and horror of horrors behind Tottenham. And even that is not taking into account the fact that Borussia Dortmund are just behind us, and that Borussia Dortmund, the amount of money they made from transfer sales is not taken into account when this is done. So to all intents and purposes, we're actually the 12th richest club in the world, which is fantastic in many ways, which also shows that our standing has changed in this particular context.
Yeah.
And that this particular context is all important and more or less determines where you finish in the league in every single major European championship. So I think it's a reality check. But that transfer market was another one, is that obviously there is very little money available.
Yeah, where do you stand on the idea that from a competitive standpoint, Arsenal might benefit, for example, from not having European football next season? So if there's a concerted effort to get the team back into the top 4, let's say there's some investment in the summer, that without the distraction of the Europa League, Arsenal might be better placed to have a good tilt at the top 4 next season, right? But the reality, of course, is that we wouldn't have European football income, which is, as you've pointed out and demonstrated with our place in the Deloitte Money League, a very important part of how football clubs are run these days. So as meager as the Europa League is in comparison to the Champions League, and it's a much smaller percentage of income. It really is. But it's still kind of necessary that, this idea that we could take a step back from a sporting point of view, it makes some sense on one level, but from a financial point of view and from trying to compete in the transfer market for players anyway, you're hamstringing yourself even further.
Yeah, but the fact is the Europa League, last season, it was very much an ambition of Emery to go as far as possible in this competition. He had won it several times, as we all know, 3 times. He knew it inside out. He thought he had a team which could go all the way to the final and to the title, and he was not very far from the truth. But even with this remarkable trip to Baku, which, by the way, had some of the more pleasing moments for the fans, which is something we should think about as well. The fact that we were lifted by this European campaign. And even this season, I would say, if I'm thinking the high points of this season, I would think, for example, the Pepe 2 free kicks in the Europa League were certainly a high point for me. I mean, I really enjoyed myself with that. Yeah. And some of the games were really great fun. And this is how we found out that Martinelli was the player we hoped he could be. And you carry on like that. But in terms of money, it brought something like 20 million euros to the club last season, which is basically nothing. I mean, it's not nothing, but it's very, very little. So we're talking 17 million pounds here, 17, for going to the final, So And you also got to put it to think of the fact we would have to start the season in July.
Potentially. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. If we finish 7th, for example. Yeah, absolutely. I was thinking of finishing 7th. You've got to start in July, just like Wolves have done, with some success, it must be said. So, yes, there is an argument saying we shouldn't worry too much about that. What we should worry about is putting in place as good a team as we can, give Arteta the time to experiment, to try things that might not work immediately. Just relax. We're not going to be relegated. We're not going to win the title. We are not going to be in the top 4. Unfortunately, now it looks out of the question. So we might as well not take it easy, but focus on different ambition. But it takes an awful lot of reprogramming of our minds to think like that.
Yes.
I mean, when is the last time we didn't have any European football with Arsenal? Was it 94, 95, or even 95, 96? This one season, perhaps, the last season of George Graham's, because immediately afterwards we're in the UEFA Cup.
Yeah, because wasn't it the Bergkamp goal on the final day of the season, which got us into the UEFA Cup that season.
Correct, yes. Yeah. And the game against Borussia Mönchengladbach, the first game of next season. Yeah. So it's been an eternity, and it would feel very, very strange for us. It might force the club to have a look at its season ticket policy again. Oh, dear.
Yeah, I mean, and do you think that's... Do you think, I mean, obviously you can't speak for everyone, nor can I, but do you think that's something we can rationalize as a fan base, that, okay, this is a sort of a rock bottom moment. We have to step back. We have to reassess. We have to take stock and go again. And a season out of European football from a pure footballing point of view, in order to build, in order to get ready for what we hope is a new generation or a new era in which we can reestablish ourselves in European football, that is something we can cope with.
Yes, on a purely theoretical, hypothetical basis. Because at the moment we're not talking that. I think the moment we are faced with that, it will feel very, very strange indeed.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's not impossible it's not impossible. It's unlikely, but it's not impossible for Arsenal to end up in the Champions League next season.
Well, it could happen.
Yeah.
It could happen. Yeah. By the way, we're still in the Europa League, and who knows? I mean, I don't know. It can happen. But it's going to be tough, that's for sure. It's a much tougher Europa League this season round, because of the teams which have come from the Champions League. I've been put back in the second tier competition. It's a tough one, tough call. But it is possible. But honestly, I would find it quite difficult myself to adapt myself to the idea. Even if it's only the Europa League, these European nights are a very important part of our past as fans, and a shared past that goes on decades now. And so it really is, and you would as well, there's always this feeling, well, if it's the first time it happens, could it be like the first time we went into the Europa League rather than Champions League, and we haven't been back to the Champions League since then? There's this fear at the back of your mind that, well, when you're going down, the only way is down a little bit more, which is why I'm so concerned about the problems that the club has got in terms of the financial problems, that is, in terms of revenue, and particularly, and I know that would sound terrible, in terms of commercial revenue, we're just not punching our weight correctly. It's
a kind of vicious circle, isn't it? Because, when you're in the Europa League, it's very hard to sell your blue chip packages to corporate clients and the club level seats and all those kind of things which were designed to bring in the revenue from the high rollers and what have you. Nobody wants to see Qarabag or Arsenal against Qarabag, for example. They don't care about that when they can go to another London stadium and see another London team playing one of Europe's big boys. So it is a vicious circle. I mean, do you have concerns? I want to talk to you about a couple of players, but just before we move off this, how do you feel about the performance of the club and the way it's been run since the departure of Arsene Wenger? Because it was always inevitable that there was going to be some flux, right? When a manager of that stature and power leaves, it takes a little while, let's say, to find the right manager. We went through Unai Emery, and Mikel Arteta might or might not be the right man. It might take us another go to find that guy. Is the same not true at executive level? That it might take us a little while or to go through a number of executive setups before we find the right one?
It's a tricky one. Quite a few people have left Arsenal Football Club in the not too distant past, and I've talked to a few of those, and they were not necessarily very optimistic as to the corporate side of things and the way things were going, and there have been mistakes made. I don't think, to be honest, that the immediate aftermath of Wenger's departure was so bad as bad as that. I mean, in fact, it's only later on that things started to unravel with Unai Emery. But we have to remember, we were quite happy with things were going for quite a while when he arrived. And, we do have short memories, but we should remember that. It's very, to be honest, I'm just asking myself, what kind of model do they have in mind? And that's my problem, is that I'm trying to think of a strategy, be it a commercial strategy or a sporting strategy, a football strategy, that the club has in mind and which is clearly acted upon. And I don't have this feeling at the moment. I get the feeling that we're living off our past a bit, to say the least. The stadium, the Wenger years, the Graham years, the stature of Arsenal Football Club in the world. It is a great club. It's one of the world's great clubs, and it will remain so. But I cannot really see where it's going. I don't know how to say that. It is not. Is it a commercial vehicle? Is it a club that its owners want to turn into a winning club again? Well, I'm not sure about that, because they're not showing many signs of wanting to put. I mean, they've put some money into it, but not a huge amount. And also they're limited. And also, what about our model when it comes to our wage structure? That doesn't seem to be right. Again, it seems to be a wage structure that is great for a club that is a Champions League regular and so forth. In my view, we're still living in the past. It's a kind of a suspended animation from the last years of the Wenger reign. We haven't really moved on from there.
Yeah, I mean, do you not think that some of that, for example, the wage bill, is that not just sort of, if you like, a hangover from that there are issues at the club, I think, if they were going to deal with going forward, we're not going to pay anybody £350,000 a week again, for example, but that's just a reality that we have to deal with, and that's a decision that was made that hangs over us.
That's exactly what I meant. Yeah. When I meant suspended animation, perhaps it's hangover, but it's a bloody long hangover, that's for sure.
And an expensive one as well.
Very.
When we talk about the strategy, a key component of that is recruitment and how you recruit players, the kind of players that you recruit, etc., etc. Do you see anything coherent in that that gives you cause for optimism? For example, we can talk about Nicolas Pepe, which we will do now in a moment, but a club record transfer that got everybody excited, and that's something that every fan loves, is when their club goes out and spends a load of money. At the same time, there was something slightly different with William Saliba, in that we identified a talent that we were prepared to wait for and pay a considerable amount for as well. But it spoke perhaps to this idea that we need to refresh and to go in a more youthful direction, and perhaps, find players in a different way that we have in the past. So are you seeing things that are just sort of beginning to link up, or would you have worries about how, players are being brought in and the profile of certain players?
I don't have too many problems with some of the players who've been recruited. I mean, we'll come to Pepe in a second. And by the way, people have been harping about Pepe being a record signing, 72 million and so forth. The way the deal is structured changes the story somewhat. And that's one thing we've got to remember. It's not as simple as people think. And I know all transfers are staggered, the payments are staggered, but the way this one is financed is a little bit more complicated than that. So yes, we spent a lot of money on that, but it was not your usual kind of transfer, I would say. I won't say more than that about it.
Okay. Okay.
But there is nothing illegal. Don't worry about it. But it's just the way it's structured is a little bit. It's quite difficult to explain, and it's different.
Okay.
When it comes to William Saliba, I'm really happy with that, and I'm sure that he's counting the hours until he can leave Saint-Etienne and have to play for this awful team. Is a class player. We know that. We got him at a decent price, I think, for the quality of the player. The fact that also, I mean, there are things like, I do think, honestly, that there have been some very good investments. I'm touching wood because I do hope that physically he's not going to be one of those players who is constantly injured. Kieran Tierney, I rate very highly. And if he gets fit again and he will show us that he was an absolute bargain at the kind of price we got him. Gabriel Martinelli was a great find. He's actually one of those players we should now sign to a 17-year-long contract.
£350,000 a week.
Yeah, exactly. Well, maybe not, but certainly to tie him down to a long-term contract and so on. And Lucas Torreira was, for me, a wonderful addition to the squad. So there have been some really decent acquisitions. They might not have been exactly in the area where we were, where we should have reinforced the team, and there are still some positions we all know that we are very slight, if not non-existent at times. As soon as there's one injury, one suspension, we are in trouble. We know we lack creativity. We know that we cannot ask Mesut Özil to be the sole creator, game in, game out. He's not this kind of player anyway, not in this kind of footballing environment anyway. But all in all, it hasn't been catastrophic. And that's the thing, is that I'm a bit too nuanced at times, but I was always a little bit, I tried not to be too optimistic when things were going well. I'm trying to be not too down at the moment that things are not going so well in some ways. The one thing that I'm really worried about is the financial aspect and the way the club is generating money and income. And when I see this income actually drop, when I see other clubs going in front of us, when I see that we are so reliant as well on, as part of our income, of all the great clubs in the world, we are the one which is the most reliant on people going through the turnstiles and spending money at the Emirates. That is actually a source of concern for me. And I'm not saying it's bad. I think that morally, ethically, it's great, actually, because it genuinely is our money, it's the fans' money. I have no problem with that whatsoever. I'm just saying that in the current environment, where commercial financial power is the one factor that makes the very big clubs take a substantial advantage over those who follow them, it is a handicap. It is a handicap.
Yeah, look, on the one hand, I have some sympathy for the commercial department in trying to do deals and what have you in the current environment with the current state of play at Arsenal and the sort of decline that we've been on over the last number of years. On the other hand, it does strike me that perhaps with better people in that department, we might be a little less behind the curve than we should be. But look,
possibly.
We'll see. Let's talk players, and you did mention Nicolas Pepe, and
sorry.
Look, I
did you need to say more?
Maybe that's it. You just
said so much already.
I know. Look, I think there are. I can do this, Philippe. I can do it. There are mitigating factors, I think, to a player's performance when he comes to a new country, and the circumstances, the environment in which he came to Arsenal and found himself in a very dysfunctional team, and at the same time he's got to adapt to a new country, a new language, a new style of football, a team which perhaps isn't set up in the way which suits him, or certainly which allowed him to thrive at Lille the way that he did. But we are 7 months into his time in England now. He has 5 goals, he's got 4 assists. It's not brilliant, it's not terrible, it's not quite as good as people were hoping or expecting. He didn't get on against Burnley in our last game. Mikel Arteta left him on the bench, or left him on the sideline warming up. It's a little bit of a worry. Are any alarm bells ringing for you, or is it a case that he is the kind of player that is going to have to work a bit harder to provide Mikel Arteta with what he wants from a guy in that position?
Yes, probably. I think the problem is that he's such an atypical player, almost eccentric player.
How would you categorize him? What would you say he is exactly?
He's a one-off, isn't he? He has absolutely marvelous close control, even though sometimes his first touch will send the ball 4 yards away, which is very frustrating. He looks to me like an uncoached player, which is not true, because he's been coached, and very well coached, throughout his whole career at Angers, at Lille. But he has retained this quality of this uncoachability, but which for me can be also a great asset. But as people in Lille found when they got him from Angers, his first season, he was very young, sure, at the time, but his first season, they didn't know what to do with him. They had no idea. They knew they'd had a very special talent. But it's only when they realized he's so special that we've got to make sure we play in a way that suits him, that he started to really click. And that was in his second season. And then his third season, when we had this wonderful Lille team with Christophe Galtier, which was built around him and a couple of other players, but who had qualities which were complementary of his own. At the moment, I'm afraid that the problem for me is not just him, even though we can talk more about him, but the fact that it doesn't strike me that our dream trio, attacking trio, which we all had fantasies about, is actually tailored in a way that it can work together properly, not to the detriment of one or the other, or two of this trio. Aubameyang being the one who will always, come out trumps, because he's a goal scorer, and he's our only goal scorer. So at the moment, but Pepe, I think, is such a talent, and we've seen that actually in a number of games where he might not have scored or provided an assist, but we looked at him and we thought, he's the one who is making things happen. He's the one that the others are absolutely terrified with. Ask Luke Shaw if he's not having nightmares about Nicolas Pepe.
Yeah.
He bloody is. He's the one who saved us against Valencia, and suddenly you realized, oh my goodness, this guy, he really has a very good left foot, doesn't he? So I think, I know it's difficult, but if it took him something like 18 months to find his place in Lille, maybe we can forgive him for taking 6 months to find his place in a new league at a higher level, certainly in terms of the competition, and in a context which is perhaps not the best suited to his capacities, be it a tactical context or the players that he's currently playing with. He can be infuriating at times. I sit by the touchline at the Emirates, so I have got by the halfway line, and it's I've got a seat bang on Nicolas Pepe, and when he does the good things and when he does the bad things too, and you take your head in your hands and you think it's not possible. But on the other hand, there is so much talent there, and he's only he's still 24.
Yes.
His experience of the high level is very new, because when he was at Angers, which is 2015-16, it was in National, which is the equivalent of League Two, and he didn't play very much at Lille to start with. He started loads of games on the bench, and it's only from 2017 onwards that he started to start games on a regular basis at Lille. So I know I'm not asking for patience for the sake of it. I'm just saying, actually, we've got a player who's potentially absolutely huge for the club.
He does have that ability, doesn't he? You think about those 2 free kicks, and you think about the impact when he burst into life at West Ham, for example.
Yeah.
When he scored that goal.
His dead ball delivery is fantastic.
It really is.
His corner kicks, my goodness, some of them are near unplayable.
Yeah, and it was a tactic that we used to fairly good effect, actually. If you think about the goal against Manchester United, it was a corner kick whipped into the near post, and it was a Lacazette header, and Socrates finished it off. I mean, they are vicious, the corner kicks. And I think it's something we've lacked on a fairly regular basis, that consistency of really difficult delivery from our corner kicks and free kicks, etc., etc. So, yeah, look, I see the talent and I see the potential. I just worry a little about the exclusion from the team the other day, and the fact that it's not just. It was easy to say when nobody was particularly happy with what Unai Emery was doing, that decision was because Emery didn't know what he was doing. And we sort of had it with Freddie as well, who said similar things about training, and Arteta, that 3 coaches have had this sort of reluctance to use him does just worry me a little bit.
Yeah, it's true. And also the impact this is going to have on his own morale and his own performances when he's picked, which he will be at times. So, yes, I wouldn't say it's a crisis situation, but it's concerning, I should say, despite all of his talent.
Sure. Okay, well, let's move to Alexandre Lacazette, and a player who is struggling. Really struggling, I think, at the moment. He's struggling for form. He's not scoring. The elements of his game which people talk up in the absence of goals, like his hold-up play and his link-up play, I don't think are quite at the level that they have been. We've seen Alexandre Lacazette play a lot better for Arsenal, and last season, of course, it's fair to say he was our player of the season, voted for by the fans. How do you look at what's going on with him now, given the fact that he's 28 years of age, he's a very experienced player? If you're Mikel Arteta, do you look at this and say, okay, he's having a very difficult time right now, but his experience, the fact that he's been around the block, gives you some hope or optimism that he will turn the corner and start to fire again? Or is it a case that you say, we can't really continue to carry this guy while he's in this kind of form? We need to sit him down. We need to give somebody else a run up front. The obvious one, of course, is Aubameyang. It's a difficult...
I thought you were going to say Martinelli.
Well,
Martinelli, for me, is the most natural goal scorer we have at the club at the moment, and I include Aubameyang in that. And I know it's a big statement, but that's my feeling of it. I mean, I'm talking almost like a scout here.
Okay.
And he is, I don't know, this boy could be absolutely huge. And I'm really, I have to check myself, because it's something that I thought the first time I saw him, I thought, my goodness, what on earth is this? In terms of, no, I'm serious.
No, I know you're serious.
I absolutely love him. I love the fact that he combines so many qualities. I mean, Aubameyang is a superb goal scorer. I'm probably exaggerating. I'm probably talking about the potential here.
Sure.
I think he's a more complete striker than Aubameyang is. He doesn't have the speed, even though he's quick. He doesn't have quite the speed. He perhaps doesn't have quite the experience and the nous and the know-how that Aubameyang has, and also this capacity that Aubameyang seems to have. When he misses a chance, it doesn't matter at all to him. Carries on. Yeah. And which is why he scores game after game after game after game. But in terms of the talent, and left foot, right foot, header, what a header of the ball.
Yes.
And I could carry on like this for a long time. Plus capacity, he can dribble as well. He can cross, he can assist. I just love him to bits. And so, which is why I was thinking, I wouldn't be surprised at all if by the end of the season he'd actually ousted Lacazette from the starting 11.
Okay,
on
but
a regular basis.
Would that be?
But I would love to see him as a centre forward, which is the other problem because it's not where he's playing at the moment.
Okay, but well, I mean, let's look at the reality. Well, but I mean, I think we can look at the reality of the Aubameyang situation and say he's got 12 months left on his contract come the summer, and Arsenal, if we talk about finances, can't afford to write off what Aubameyang might bring in, particularly when you think, a club like Barcelona are reportedly very interested in Aubameyang, and if there's one club out there that will overpay the shit out of a transfer fee, it's Barcelona.
Especially at the moment.
Yeah, exactly. They paid.
This is exactly the right moment to sell them players.
So, is the reality of this situation with Lacazette, if we're looking at it strategically, we move Aubameyang back into the centre forward position, which is where we know that is his best position. His quality means he can score goals from the left hand side. But if you look back and you plan for next season, is the idea then play Aubameyang as your central striker, you give Martinelli the playing time and the development time on the left-hand side where he has shown as well that he can still contribute with goals, and come the summer, depending on how it goes, you could then be thinking about moving Martinelli into that central position.
Yeah, you could do that, and which is of course very harsh on Alex Lacazette, because there's one thing that hasn't changed throughout all his time at Arsenal. His work rate is absolutely superb. And I think that's one of the reasons, by the way, why he's enjoyed or he's been selected on a number of occasions when his form in front of goal might not have justified it, is because Arteta knows that he can count on him at all times to press and do an awful lot of work. He's also, I come back to that, the fact that it is a strange combination of attacking qualities. The way Lacazette does his runs has got absolutely nothing to do with the way Aubameyang does his runs. And Pepe doesn't do runs. Pepe receives the ball and goes to players, or he doesn't. What we call appel in French, which basically literally is to call for the ball. And this is how we call this particular runs. Now, Lacazette is very good at doing those very short runs within the penalty, within the box. And you need some people who are aware of it and alert to this to feed the ball to him instantly. And then he's deadly. Now, he had that at Lyon with Nabil Fekir, for example, or Corentin Tolisso. So he doesn't quite have it at Arsenal. And I always thought that this was a side of Lacazette's game which was not exploited fully. The fact that he does all these little... He's not super quick, but he's very quick in his mind, and he has this wonderful 8-10 yard runs, and we know that he's one who can shoot from the hip, as it were, with very little backlift, in strange positions, with knowing when the goal is obscured or whatever. He does all these things. We haven't really used that as well as we could, but this said as well, coming back to Lacazette was never a huge goal scorer. And I think we forget that even when he was at Lyon, and people were thinking, he scored something like 28 goals in a season. And I remember repeating people at the time, say, well, you keep saying that. I can tell you, he's not a 25 goal a season goal scorer. Of these 28 goals, 11 were penalty kicks. 11. And he always was somebody who scored a goal every 2 games, not more than that. And in fact, before we started talking, I actually decided to do some calculations and to look at his efficiency in front of goal with Arsenal throughout his 3 seasons here. And in fact, you will find out that he doesn't take penalty kicks anymore. He only did it in his first season here. And if you take the penalties out of the equation, it's 1 goal every 184 minutes in his first season.
Okay.
1 goal every 192 minutes, so the same thing in his second season. 1 goal every 256 minutes in this current season, which shows a decline, but it is not the kind of decline that our eyes are telling us is happening. It looks far worse than that, doesn't it?
It does, yeah.
But it's still this kind of return, a goal every 3 games, well, in terms of playing time as well, that's not good.
No.
That is concerning. But he's never been as prolific a goal scorer as people have thought. That's the thing, that in his perception, he's also somebody who makes loads happen. He's good at, he assists loads of goals. I mean, last season he assisted 10 goals in the Premier League, which is, absolutely remarkable. So he's a very complete centre forward, whom perhaps is not necessarily the right setup for him to show all of his qualities. But it is something that you could say of so many other players in this Arsenal side, that you have to wonder about the way that the side was built, perhaps with no exact idea of what it should play like, what an ideal Arsenal side would look like. Whereas I know what an ideal Tottenham side looked under Pochettino. Under the current one, I don't really care, to be absolutely honest.
Sure.
I know what an ideal Antonio Conte or Sarri side looked like. And even if I go down, I know what an ideal Sean Dyche side looks like, or an ideal Roy Hodgson side looked like.
Yeah.
You came out. I do not think we still know exactly what this team has been assembled for, what kind of game, playing style we should approach. There have been loads of words bandied about, which for me are a little bit like they're words which mean a lot and don't mean anything. Like, pressing, intense pressing. Yeah, well, everybody does it these days. What kind of pressing? I mean, we saw it with Emery at the beginning. We saw it with Arteta. Have you noticed, by the way, we don't press the same way or as intensely as we did in the first games with Arteta in charge at the moment?
Yes, I did notice that. Yeah,
we back off quite a bit more. On the other hand, what he's been working on, and which has been really satisfying to see, is that what he's trying to do is, when we defend, is not to have all 11 players within 30 yards of Leno's goal, which is what we did when we sort of compressed the lines to such an extent that there was no capacity of doing quick transitions, and we basically were walking on each other's toes all the time, and Xhaka would bump into Guendouzi, who would block Torreira's run, and Luis would arrive and tackle everybody.
Yeah.
So this is happening far less often. So this is one side of the game that he's working on, which I find very encouraging. So in a way, I've just contradicted myself, but in a nice way.
I know what you mean. So, final thought just on Lacazette. Is it time to accept that there is a decline in his performances, which merits a place on the bench rather than a place in the team, and let him work his way back into first-team contention?
I think if that happened, we would be looking at Lacazette leaving the club at the end of the season. And he's still got another 2 years left on his contract.
And considering we're about to sell Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang to Barcelona for a massive fee...
Yeah, $500 million, I hear.
$500 million, yeah. Well, interesting times ahead. As ever, a pleasure discussing them with you, Philippe. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed to Philippe. You can find him on Twitter at Philippe Auclair, and we will talk to him again before the end of the season, no doubt. Right, last week I asked you a question, a very simple question. I can't really remember what it was. It was something about, which kind of fruit were the socks or something, and it was like grizzly gooseberry or something. Anyway, the answer, as you all know, was bruised banana, the famous bruised banana shirt, and we have got famous bruised banana socks to give away. We have 5 pairs, with thanks to our friends from soccerclub.com, and the winners are... Dan Corrigan, Bernadette Martin, Abishkar Shrestha, I think. Well, it's definitely him, but I just don't know if my pronunciation was right. Jerry Gould and Josh Evans. Well done to you guys. I will be in touch. I'll get your details. We'll get the socks sent out to you. For the rest of you, there is a 10% discount if you go to soccerclub.com and order something. Use the code Arseblog10 at checkout. That is Arseblog10 to get 10% off your very own bruised banana socks. Okay, this weekend the Arsenal women are at home to Spurs women at Meadow Park in a North London derby. The game is sold out, but you can watch it live on BBC Online and the Red Button in the UK, or you can watch it on the FA Player app, which is totally free of charge. It's not geo-blocked, so you can get it anywhere in the world. Just go to the App Store, download the FA Player, create an account, and you log in, and away you go. That's it. You can watch the game and hopefully watch the Arsenal women do the double this season over their Tottenham counterparts. There are 2 more home games in February after the Spurs game. An FA Cup tie against Lewis on the 16th of February and Reading women on the 23rd of February. Tickets are still available for those games through arsenal.com. Check out the official website. For more details, get down and support the Arsenal women. Ahead of this game on Sunday, Tim Stillman sat down with Arsenal midfielder Jordan Nobbs to talk about the game itself, the increased spotlight on women's football, and with it an increase in criticism, which is quite interesting, and of course cruciate ligament injury, something that Jordan Nobbs suffered and has made her way back from, but Arsenal have had a clutch of those over the last year or so, year and a half, and she talks about that with Tim. It's a really interesting conversation, so here it is. This is Tim and Jordan Nobbs.
Okay, joining us now on the show, Arsenal midfielder Jordan Nobbs. Jordan, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
North London derby this weekend. Big game for Arsenal, not just because it's a North London derby, but big game in the WSL, especially having lost the last 2 league games. Honestly, does this game in the WSL feel any different to the others? Does it feel like a derby yet? Or is that still developing? Because we know there's a historic rivalry on the men's side, but has that really translated over to the women's side, do you think?
I think it did when we played them at the men's stadium. I think that atmosphere, the vibe we had was unbelievable, and I think it did feel like a derby. I think, yes, there's still a way to go. I think the fans are a big part of making it a derby, and the way they are supporting us and everything like that, but I still think we just go into the game after a win and knowing it is, yes, might be a little bit more aggressive at times, but I think ultimately it's maybe the media that pick up on the big derby, but I think every game in this league now is so big for us. It's kind of treating every game like a derby and go for the win.
And that was going to be another one of my questions, actually, looking back to the last game in November at whatever Spurs are calling their stadium. I can't quite remember what it is. But I felt like Spurs played maybe not above themselves, but I felt like there was a real lift in their performance, particularly in the first half. Do you think that made a big difference on the day? It was a record crowd for the WSL as well.
Yeah, I think they played a great game. I mean, we'd obviously played them in pre-season and won very easily, so I think it did show the difference in atmosphere, pressure, making it feel like a derby. It was a very exciting game. I think we just did an interview a minute ago and said it was one of the best moments we've had this year, playing there and playing against them. So I think the more we can have games like that and feelings in games like that, it is exciting for not just us but the people watching.
And I like the way you said them there instead of Spurs. That's the kind of language that's going to create the rivalry. I'm interested as well in, you weren't born an Arsenal girl necessarily, but you've been at the club for 10 years now, and I think you've made very clear that you have, very deep affection for this football club. Do you have any role at all, this week in the build-up to the game to let, particularly some of the girls who've come over from other countries, know about what type of a game this is and what this means to the fans, or is it just better not to talk about that and treat it like any other game?
I still think you treat it like any. I think we're very, very lucky that we have very experienced players who've played in very big national team games or club games or Champions League, so it's not the hardest challenge to get them up for a game, but I think they know, like I said, after the last time we played them, how big these games are, and this is a must-win game, not just for the league, but yes, it is Spurs, and we want to constantly beat these teams, and I think playing for Arsenal and the love of this shirt, these games are what you want to play in. So it is, when we said that they were coming up into our league, that was an exciting time for us, because it was like, it's great, we want to keep being role models on the pitch, but we also want people to come and be excited watching.
And she can't play on Sunday, but Emma Mitchell obviously made the move across to Spurs on loan. And personally, I had a lot of debate online about this, which I wasn't expecting, because I was trying to set the context that actually in the women's game it's slightly different. Mm-hmm. And actually Spurs have got a lot of ex-Arsenal players, like good friends of yours, like Gemma Davison, Rebecca Spencer, who have a history here. I was trying to explain it's slightly different because the money's not as big. It means Mitch doesn't have to move house and she gets regular game time. And actually I got a fair bit of kickback on that from people who are knowledgeable about the women's game. Was it strange for you guys to see her make that move at all, or did it just feel quite normal?
I guess it's a difficult one because, I've been here a long time with Mitch, and, she's a player that should be playing game time, and I think for her it was more just us thinking about her as a person and a player, and wherever she chose to go or play, we fully supported her, and we want her to do well there. So we are glad that she's not playing against us at the weekend, but we have Mitch's full back, and I guess in a good way from the fans. It's nice to see that they see that rivalry. But yes, like you say, I think in the women's game you've got to do what's right for you, and you want to play as much football as you can.
And we touched on the last game, the reverse fixture being in big stadium with a sellout crowd. Looks like Boreham Wood's going to be sold out on Sunday. Nevertheless, and I should really put on the record the context for this, which is, the men don't have a game this weekend, but the Premier League didn't make that clear until a few weeks ago. So lots of people asking the question about you guys playing at the Emirates more often, and actually the logistics were a little bit difficult this time because the Premier League didn't sort the fixture list out. Nevertheless, would it have been nice to have this sort of game at the Emirates, do you think?
It always would be, yeah. I think it's showed with other clubs, and even us playing against Spurs in the big stadiums. It is a great feeling. It's a great experience. It's good for us to learn pressure like that, and we want the women's game to keep getting bigger crowds. So we need to learn in some way. But I think also I keep saying, I've been here 10 years and I've seen a lot through Arsenal, and I'd never like the game to just jump into areas that might not be ready to jump yet. So I think if we're filling out Boreham Wood, it shows that, can we start to improve that, because maybe more people than just, I don't know what the capacity is, 4,000 can come. We want to play in bigger stadiums, then keep creating this, great place for the women's game. But I think it's just doing it at the right times, and making sure that enough people are still coming to support us and want to come watch.
And thinking kind of more generally about the season now, Arsenal in third place in the WSL. I already asked you the title race question on Sunday, so I won't ask you that again. But Conti Cup final coming up, Champions League quarter-final, some really exciting ties against Paris Saint-Germain. How do you feel the season has gone so far, just looking at the whole team and the whole squad?
I mean, we've definitely not given up on the league yet. Yes, it is out of our hands, but we've seen it happen before. We just need to keep performing and winning every game. There's a bit more pressure on us now, but that's football, and I think the fact that we've got Champions League, we're in another cup final, we're still a club that want to bring trophies home, and that's the reason why people come to play at this club. We want to be in regular finals, so it's an exciting time for us to play in that, and I think Champions League's the big one. That's the one that we're most excited for, and we want to get to that final. I mean, it's a reason why we want to sign big players here, and that's the most exciting time about being there in the women's game.
And looking ahead to the kind of the Conti Cup final against Chelsea in a few weeks' time. I asked Jill Roord this after the semi-final, but are you guys almost glad to be playing Chelsea just because of the way the last game went, where Arsenal really didn't show themselves in that game, and quite a lot went wrong quite early, and it wasn't really a game for most of it? Do you almost welcome the chance to take Chelsea on again, almost with something to prove?
Yeah, I think especially when there's a trophy involved, winning is going to be a very big day that day. So I think we know that we didn't play well enough ourselves, and also, we did make a big change in shape, but we want to win that trophy, and I think the fact that it's against Chelsea, it'll be a great game for the eye, and we have something to prove. We have to make sure that we go out there, we perform better as individuals, and win. And
a couple of months ago, I said to you that I wouldn't ask you about your knee anymore, but I'm going to break that promise, I'm afraid. Just to get I think it'd be really useful to get your perspective, just because in the men's team at the moment, you've got Hector Bellerin and Rob Holding, who kind of did their cruciate ligaments at a similar time to you, slightly later. And actually, you kind of built up quite a big rapport with Rob Holding. Is that right, with throughout your treatment, because you kind of did it at the same time? And I'm sensing, certainly on the men's side, some slight impatience with those players because they've actually been back a couple of months. But I think perhaps there's like a little bit of misunderstanding about what coming back from an ACL actually entails, and playing again doesn't mean you're back, kind of thing. You've been back for about 5 months now. How do you feel? Do you feel you're at your level yet, or do you feel close to the level you were at when you got injured?
I'm definitely not at the level that I want to be at, and it's really hard to explain how it impacts you as a player. I mean, the amount of times you hear people go, "Oh, like I'm a bit rusty. I've been out for 3 weeks." We were out for 10 months. It's a major blow to your mindset, to your awareness on the pitch, your body. Just getting back into the swing of things. But I think my main thing that I've just needed a bit more of is confidence. I think when you come back from an injury, even though you're kind of back, actually a few months of that is being right. You can play minutes here, you can't play minutes here, and it's very, very hard to stay mentally focused, strong, and kind of want to be at your best though at that time. So even if you're ready for any challenges to come, because you've been through the hard stuff, actually still that game time is, you want to be firing straight away, and it does just take time. It's not something that changes overnight, and I think it's just about everyone believing in you. I think the more you feel people believing in you, then that'd bring the best, especially out of me. So I think I've still got a way to go, and I think for me personally, the only way that comes is from consistent game time. So I think that's difficult, and I can understand from the boys' side of thing as well. I think when you've got competition, we're at great clubs. You just want that support and belief from your manager or players, to have in yourself, to know that you can. It is just going to be a little bit of a roller coaster, but you can get back to your best, and I want to make sure I'm back to my best for this club.
And obviously your game as well relies a lot on athleticism, on getting up and down the pitch and things like that. And I spoke to a guy who's a knee surgeon who kind of specialises in ACL operations, and the way he explained it to me was it's not the actual ACL tear that takes time. He said actually the big problem, I guess, is that after you have the surgery, you're laid up for a few weeks and you're doing nothing, and therefore the muscle mass and the athleticism just completely goes from your game. Was that for you the biggest challenge, or was it the mental challenge of the knee?
I would say mine was more mental. I think me personally, fitness is something I love. I think it's a great part in my game, and I think you get given that 10 months to get yourself to near about where you used to be. But I think the main thing is your mindset. I think the mind of probably protecting your knee, looking after muscles, naturally not running as much. I think that's been the main thing for me. But definitely you go through a very tough time trying to get your fitness back up, because you go through the operation, very basic movements. I think you're very naive thinking, it might be 10 months, but probably in about a month I'll be jogging or running or moving, whereas actually you're still learning to straighten your knee. When you think about someone just telling you, right, straighten your knee, push your knee down into the bed, you think, oh my God. Like, I was speaking to Chambers the other day, and he was like, it's daft that goes through your head, but like you really don't think you can like walk again or run again, because you're like, how does my knee end up moving the way it used to? So it is a very big operation that just does take time, and I think you've all just got to believe in the process and believe in yourself when you get back on the pitch.
Yeah, I spoke to Dan Carter, I think maybe her second game back at the end of last season, and I asked her probably quite naively about her rehab, and she immediately stopped me and said, my rehab's not over. Just because I'm playing again, it's not over. Like, I'm still going to go back to the gym, and at the time, we're getting to the end of the season, and she was like, my pre-season's going to be totally different to everyone else's. And on that score, you had, I think, 3 games just before Christmas where kind of Joe just took you out of the team. What was the conversation there when kind of Joe made that decision? Was that about your knee, basically?
Pretty much. I mean, obviously, I think we were rested in the midweek, and then, you know, we had a game where I'd previously done my ACL on that pitch, and we've also got a great squad here, you know, so I think it was a very sensible thing to do, but also we've got the squad to play games here, so yeah, you know, like I said, even leading up to that, you're in, you're out, you're 60 minutes, you're 20 minutes, you're 45, and I think the 3 games a week has been very difficult because, you know, the loading in that is you haven't got a normal week training, so you can't be like, right, I'll have a good week training, minutes, good week training. It's kind of like, well, I can't play minutes then, training's maybe, you know, a little bit less, so there's a lot going on that you have to really think about, but you know, touch wood, when I look at other people who've done their ACL, I've had no niggles, or yes, you know, I obviously got a kick against Chelsea the week, but that comes with football. But I've not had anything that's you know, affected me along the way. I think it's just me getting back to my best performance-wise now.
And a final question, we'll move away from the knee now, and I promise I'll never ask you about that again. I read quite an interesting article on BBC Sport today by Emma Sanders, and she was talking about the increasing mental challenges in women's football now that the coverage is going up. And I think I've certainly noticed from covering it, excuse me, that now all of the games are on, people disagree with me a lot more, which is when I write stuff, which is terrible, how dare they. But Emma was writing about the kind of the increased mental challenge with the increased criticism, the increased scrutiny, because people can watch these games now. Have you or any of the squad been aware of that at all, or are you in kind of almost too much of a bubble to even realise?
I do think it does come into it. I think when I did actually get injured, you have a lot more to think about, and you realise how much psychology plays a part in being the best player, and how much little things or big things can affect you along the way. And you are in kind of a football bubble, you know, you're around the same people a lot, you have to live a certain environment because of the type of sport you play, and I think now that there is, you know, better players in the game, you know, there's more selection, there's you know, pressure of, you know, we have to talk about it, you know, how much do you earn at certain clubs, and you know, your lifestyle after football. So I think there definitely is that coming into the game. I would say I would like to hope that every club now has someone that they could talk to away from football, that the club have got in to have a voice to. I think that's crucial, in especially the young kids growing up. I think they need to be ready for how different it's going to be to when we were, you know, 10 years ago. So I remember when I first got into the England senior squad with Hope Powell, and we were talking about, you know, the media then obviously was very negative in the women's game, and that was God knows how many years ago now. So it's very different now, and I think we need to still be wary of that and make sure that mentally everyone's in a good headspace.
And do Arsenal offer, this is one of the things Emma was writing about, like clubs having wellbeing specialists and psychologists. I take it Arsenal offer that kind of thing. Is that any, like, have you guys spoken about that kind of thing at all?
Yeah, I think I don't know when they came in a few years ago, but yeah, we have psychologists here, and I think it's been crucial for a lot of the girls to speak to, especially me. I spoke to one of ours just about, you know, confidence and even you know, things outside of football. You know, you leave your family, your friends, your world to live your dream, I'm definitely not moaning here. I've loved every minute of coming here, but you do have to realise the impact it has on your mindset, and I think keeping yourself in a good place is crucial in a very physical sport like this.
And you've kind of been on the other side of that as well, particularly with the World Cup coverage, where you did a lot of work with the BBC. Did you find that strange at all, being on kind of, I guess, that side of the fence and commenting on games that your teammates and some of your best friends in the world were playing? Was that odd for you?
Yeah, luckily, Gabby was obviously incredible with the BBC, and she never gave me any really terrible questions. But I absolutely loved it. It mentally got me through the World Cup, and I don't really know what I would have done at home. Feeling very sorry for myself, I think, actually, if I didn't have a goal or feel like I was learning something. So it was a little bit strange and quite depressing at times, but it was definitely kept me afloat through my injury.
Jordan, thank you so much for your time, and I speak for every Arsenal fan when I say best of luck on Sunday. We'll all be rooting for you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That was Tim Stillman, who you can follow on Twitter at Stillberto, talking to Arsenal midfielder Jordan Nobbs ahead of this weekend's North London derby against Spurs. So good luck to the Arsenal women in that one. And that, folks, is just about that for this week's show. Thank you as ever for being here. If you'd like something else to listen to and you're not already an Arseblog member on Patreon, James and I recorded another episode of the podcast we call Waffle, in which we talk about anything and everything apart from Arsenal. Suggestions and questions and topics from our Patreon members. There are already 4 of them on the site. You get instant access to those and all the other podcasts and articles as well. You can sign up for just $5 a month at patreon.com/Arseblog. Patreon.com/Arseblog. James and I will be here on Monday with an Arsecast Extra, a sort of non-football Arsecast Extra. So there might be an element of waffle to that one as well, but hopefully we'll have a few Arsenal bits and pieces to talk about. Until then, have yourselves a great weekend. We'll catch you on the next one. Take it easy, folks. Cheers. Bye-bye.
I am Robot Gazidis. You are the new manager of Arsenal. Let me show you around. This is the main entrance. This is the media room, and beside it is the cell where we imprison those who ask difficult questions. This is the first team dressing room. This is the visitors' dressing room. And before I take you down to the pitch, this is the most important part of the tour. This is our tunnel area. Isn't it impressive? Would you like to see more of my tunnel?